good evening, and welcome. Tonight we're going to be going over the history and geography of Zimbabwe, which alphabetically in list of countries is the very last one. Let's just start right off. Let me get my pencil here so I can point out for you. Zimbabwe is in southern Africa, and as you can see, it is a landlocked country, meaning that it does not have a coastline. It borders Zambia, right up here. It borders Mozambique, down there. It has this small border with South Africa, small but important to its history. It borders Botswana, and a very teeny tiny border here with Namibia, which I've done Namibia in my Countries of the World series. This span right here is a little stretch of land called the Caprivi Strip, and it was created because this land belonged to the Germans, this land belonged to the English. Basically, the English conned the Germans into believing that the Zambezi River right here would be a good access point to the ocean. So the Germans let the English have this land, the Germans could have that land. But what the Germans didn't know is that you cannot sail the Zambezi River to the ocean because of this right here. This is Victoria Falls, one of the most beautiful waterfalls in the world, the biggest waterfall in Africa, I believe. It's stunning. Like, it looks like if the Grand Canyon had water pouring down the sides. It's that majestic. It has like big sprays of water shooting up out of it. Whenever the sun's out, there's a big rainbow. You can hear it from like miles and miles away. It's something else. It's one of the most beautiful waterfalls in the world, easily. But this border up here is the Zambezi River, which does flow out to the Indian Ocean eventually. Along here we have this big lake called Lake Kariba. It was formed when the Kariba Dam was created, and I think there might be a picture in this book. I have it up here so you can see the country. I'll flip through this book after we get through its history and show you some pictures of Zimbabwe. Another really important river is down here. This is the Limpopo River. There are many, many other rivers that flow throughout Zimbabwe, like lots of them, but those are the two that always stand out whenever I was researching Zimbabwe geography. There are three main land areas in Zimbabwe. The first one is up here. It's called the Highveld. And the Highveld is like a big plateau area, fairly flat, and it's where a majority of the population and the major cities are. Notably, we have the capital city here of Harare, and there's also Bulawayo, which is the second largest city, and I'll mention it briefly in its history. Along here on the sides, we have the Middelveld. There's an area right along here that's used for like mining. It has lots of like gold minerals, but the Middelveld is pretty slopey downhill, has all these rivers going down from the Highveld. And then along here and down here is the Lowveld, which is like a scrubland, very rocky, big rocks, big rock formations. We do have this area over here, which is Hwangi National Park, which is like a classic African national park with like your elephants, lions, rhinos. And then this one up here is the Monopoles National Park. It's called that because during the dry season it's very dry, and during the rainy season lots of watering holes will appear, hence Monopoles. And this region over here is the most mountainous part of Zimbabwe. It's known as the Eastern Highlands, and it's where you can find its highest peak, which is right here. It's Mount Inyangani. But like one of the coolest parts of Zimbabwe, I think, is the Great Zimbabwe, because if you know me, you know I love like stone circles and ancient sites and things like that. The Great Zimbabwe is a cool one, but it's actually not very old in terms of like ancient sites. It's not that ancient. So let's start off by talking about the older ancient times, because of course, being in southern Africa, Zimbabwe's had humans living in it since Homo sapiens came about. Africa being the birthplace of Homo sapiens. The San culture lived in here at one point. Lots of other cultures lived in this area. But the first prominent one, the first group to form like cities and states and things like that, would have been the Shona, which there's still many Shona people living in Zimbabwe today. They started creating states around the 10th century. By the 11th century, they had created the Kingdom of Mapungubwe, which I was like looking around this map trying to find Mapungubwe sites, and I found Mapungubwe National Park right down here. That was the first great kingdom in this area, and we know about them because they actually did a lot of trade with the Arabs and with people in Eastern Asia. Trade primarily with modern-day Syria and Iran, and trade with India and China. Modern-day India and China, I should say. And then it was around the 13th to 15th centuries when the Great Zimbabwe was built. So like I said, in terms of ancient sites, not very ancient at all. The Great Zimbabwe is really interesting in that based on the houses that have been uncovered, there were like tens of thousands of people living here. It was a massive city in terms of, antiquity. Huge, honestly. And they built really incredible structures out of stone, complete out of stone. No mortar was used. I'm going to have a whole video about the Great Zimbabwe, so don't worry, you can learn a lot about it in detail. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss it. But it just had really fascinating architecture, and they didn't have writing. We just have to figure out how they lived based on what few artifacts can be found. A lot of the buildings, we still don't know what they were used for. We can only guess, but they were spectacular. Like the huge stone walls that they built is unreal. We don't really know what happened to the people that lived there. Well, we know eventually, but we're not 100% sure why the city was abandoned. I think that it was because there are too many people living there. I mean, I think it got up to like 14,000 people in like this small region. There's just no space for people. Plus, they primarily dealt in cattle, and you can only have so many cows grazing in your area before there's too many, and they don't have space and they don't have grass. So people split off to find other places to live. Eventually, Great Zimbabwe was abandoned. But the people that lived there, we do know what happens to them. Sometime between 1450 and 1760, the Zimbabwe Kingdom wound up becoming the Mutapa Kingdom, also known sometimes as the Monomotapa Kingdom, depending on which history you're reading. And they came into contact with the Portuguese once they landed and started trying to take over the ports. Trade initially was pretty good, but there were some people of the Mutapa that were not happy with trading with the Portuguese. They split off to form their own empire called the Rosui, and they were very violent. They did not want European contact whatsoever, and they did not want people to contact the Europeans, so they raided other villages using muskets, and, started to take over the area slowly but surely. But they were eventually stopped by a whole other group of people. So, in 1821 in South Africa, Shaka, the leader of the Zulus, had a disagreement, which I'm sure we'll get into when I do South Africa in my history series. We have to talk about Shaka Zulu. I mean, you have to. But one of his closest companions broke off from him, took his followers, and left the area. His name was Mzilikazi, and he was the first king of the Ndebele people. His people crossed the Transvaal in South Africa. They crossed the Limpopo River, and they were also very violent. They came and attacked all of the villages, cities, taking over the kingdoms. They defeated the Rozwi and absorbed them, and became the new big power. They established Matabeleland, which was all down here, and Mzilikazi founded the city of Bulawayo, which became his capital. He's still a very beloved figure in Zimbabwe today. You'll see it in this book, his tomb is actually like protected and guarded 24 hours a day. He died in 1868, and his son Lobengula succeeded him. Now, 1888, another group of people come to Zimbabwe, led by a man named Cecil Rhodes, and he was from England. He actually founded the De Beers Diamond Company, and he was looking to build a colony in a place where he could also, mine. And he settled upon this land. He actually met with Lobengula at this spot here, known as the World's View Hill. Cecil Rhodes is actually buried there. But it was there that he and Lobengula made an agreement that Cecil Rhodes could use his mining land to mine. And that was a huge mistake on Lobengula's part, to be honest. Because Cecil Rhodes didn't just bring like miners, he brought over lots of Europeans, lots of English down and settled and created a colony and built cities. He established what is now Harare. It was known then as Salisbury. And, just started taking over land that wasn't theirs at all. It sparked the first Matabele War, which Lobengula very drastically lost. He actually died while he was fleeing from battle. Left the whole kingdom in disarray. Eventually, the colony officially was established as Rhodesia, named after Cecil Rhodes, Rhodesia, Rhodes, in 1895. That sparked the Second Matabele War, and a movement that is known as the Chimurenga Revolts, or just the Chimurenga. Still a big part of Zimbabwe's history. It was very much like a fight back against these colonizers coming in, but it was also unsuccessful. The revolts lasted from 1896 to 1897. By 1898, they renamed the colony to Southern Rhodesia because the area up here in Zambia became Northern Rhodesia. That's how big they expanded their colony. By 1922, Southern Rhodesia became a self-governing British colony, and they went to work creating laws to benefit the white Europeans that had settled there, mainly in land ownership and farms. So the white people were the minority, but they owned far more land than the black natives that lived here. But there was nothing they could really do about it. Their hands were tied. The white people were in charge. Eventually, a white person named Ian Smith came to power. This is much later, in like the 60s. I just skipped over World War I and World War II. People from Zimbabwe very bravely fought in both World Wars, I should mention very quickly. But Ian Smith created a group called the Rhodesian Front, or the RF. And just to put it bluntly, it was a white supremacist group. and he came into power, he declared independence from Britain on November 11th, 1965. And this wasn't like they made an agreement with Britain because, at that time Britain and France were allowing their old colonies to gain independence. No, Ian Smith just said, "We are not a part of Britain." Like, he woke up and chose independence. It shocked the world. Sanctions were placed on the country by the United Nations. It wasn't really recognized by many people. Obviously, Great Britain placed sanctions on Zimbabwe, well, Southern Rhodesia. I think he just renamed it to Rhodesia at that point. I'm not positive. But that very drastically hurt the economy. But what also happened was another fight from the black people who lived here against the whites, and this one wound up being successful finally. Two different groups sprung up in opposition to this new country. One was called the Zimbabwe African People's Union, or ZAPU. It was led by a man named Joshua Nkomo. The other one was the Zimbabwe African National Union, or ZANU, and that was led by Robert Mugabe. Guerrilla warfare lasted until around 1978, when they finally made peace with Ian Smith. Wound up having an election in 1979 that changed the country. Literally, it changed the name to Zimbabwe Rhodesia. They made a new constitution. Black people were allowed to hold positions of power. They voted to rejoin Britain as a colony, among many other positive changes. But Robert Mugabe wound up becoming prime minister. In the next elections in 1980, like the official ones, the ZANU party won the election, the majority of the seats. And they had a formal sit-down with Britain and officially became independent the right way, not the rebelling, like, United States way, basically. So Robert Mugabe is basically in charge at this point. And, on paper, that's great that a strong, very intelligent leader was in charge of his country, in charge of his homeland, as it should be. The people that live there should be the ones in charge. However, an event happened not long after he took power, which is known in Zimbabwe as the Gukurahundi, which, to put it bluntly, was a genocide against the Ndebele people. Around 3,000 to 80,000 Ndebele were killed. We will never have an exact number. They built military camps, concentration camps to kill and torture people. It was horrifying. This is a relaxation channel, like I always say. We don't get into gory details here, but we do acknowledge that horrible things happened. And, we acknowledge it, we mourn it, but as an ASMR channel, we're not going to dwell too long on terrible, horrible things, but I'm not dismissing it or brushing it off as like no big thing. It was a very big thing, and it was very terrible, but I'm just going to leave it at that and move on for the sake of relaxation. So, the way that this genocide was ended was that the ZAPU party and the ZAMU party merged into one. It ended all of that racial tension against the Shona and Ndebele. However, it created like a one-party majority, which is never a good thing in a democratic country. Let's just put it that way. A series of very bad events happened in Zimbabwe after this. In the 1990s, the AIDS crisis hit Zimbabwe very hard. About 25% of the population was affected by AIDS and the HIV virus, which, growing up in the 90s, like, I can't stress enough how horrible that whole epidemic was. I mean, COVID is one thing, but, the AIDS virus was tragic, especially in Africa. But then in 2000, the government passed something called the Fast Track Land Reform, And it was a way to, it had good intentions, it had good wording, because the white Zimbabweans still owned a majority of the land, particularly the farmland. So it was like, well, we need to, make it more equal. The Zimbabweans, the black Zimbabweans, should own just as much land as the white Zimbabweans. But the land basically said, if you fought in the Civil War, just pick a farm and it's yours. So white people's farms were raided and told that they can't live there and they can't farm there anymore, which is not a very good policy, to be honest. Large farms were broken up into smaller ones. Some people came and took over farms who weren't veterans from the guerrilla war. They were too young to have fought in it, but they claimed it anyway. And these people weren't farmers. They were just there to get free land. The crops were pretty unsuccessful after that because they weren't being cultivated by people who had lived there for the past 100 years, knowing how to take care of their crops in the land. And then sanctions were imposed on Zimbabwe again, for this very shocking policy of just allowing people to pick land and take it. All of this hurt Zimbabwe very economically, especially the farming, because that led to a massive famine. Again, we'll never know the numbers, but tens of thousands of people starved from the early 2000s to the late 2010s. The sanctions didn't help either. But people did lead protests against these policies during this time. Not just because of the economy, but also because of the elections. Because Robert Mugabe would wind up very suspiciously winning elections by a large margin, and a lot of people didn't vote for him. There was a new political party springing up against Mugabe, because Mugabe was, like I said, it was more of a one-party country at this point. He was consolidating a lot of power, and as we know from my series and just history in general, when you have one party and a leader who starts getting more and more power to themselves, it's never a good thing. It always ends terribly 100% of the time. In the 2002 elections in particular, the man running against Mugabe, Mugabe claimed that he was plotting an assassination. So Mugabe had him arrested, went to the Supreme Court. In 2004, the court found him innocent. It was all just a distraction to, not let people realize that he had stolen the election that year. But people obviously noticed. It came to a head in 2017 when a coup overthrew his government, and he resigned before he could be impeached by the government. So Zimbabwe today is a country that is getting back on its feet, recovering from this economic loss, basically. We don't know where it's going to go from here, but hopefully it gets a lot better in Zimbabwe. Things are looking up, considering it's COVID times, but you know what I mean. So, without further ado, let's flip through the book here, and I'll show you some pictures. Look at this kid. Gorgeous. Let's flip through here. Look at this big old baobab. Baobab, baobab, baobab. This little cute village down there. Let's check it out. Make some page sounds for you too. Here is Victoria Falls. Stunning, right? It's literally like cliff, water falling off. It's fantastic. It's so gorgeous. And of course, beautiful rainbows anytime the sun's out because there's so much water in the air. We have an elephant. Gorgeous. And there's some buffalo. This is at Lake Kariba, it says. And here is a little village. When I said the Lowveld is very rocky, these are the rocks I'm talking about. These huge rock formations are so cool. Here we have a political map of Zimbabwe. See all the major cities. Matebele land up here. And Mashona land also, another culture. Here's Harare, the capital city. Another one of the big changes once ZANU came into power was they renamed all of the European sounding things. So Salisbury became Harare. I think this book has a chart in it of the cities that were changed. Land between two rivers. Yes, I'm talking about the Zambezi and the Limpopo. This is the Zambezi. Divides Zimbabwe and Zambia. Mount Inyangani up here. There we go. The highest point in Zimbabwe. This says it's a satellite view of the Great Dike, which is that mining region. Around here in Zimbabwe. There we go. A geographical map of Zimbabwe, so you can really see how like the Highveld is like up here and the land just kind of goes like that. Let's see. Some of the this is sandstone and shale, it says, but you can really see what I mean by like the sloping lands. Here's that chart I was talking about. So like Salisbury became Harare. Fort Victoria was Masvingo. So on and so forth. Here's a copy. That's what these big rocks are called in the Lowveld. This is Bulawayo. And this is says soil erosion caused by heavy rain. So Zimbabwe is one of those places where it's either raining, like pouring, or it's not raining. So when it's not raining, the land gets dry, and then when it rains, it floods, gets all wet, and then it winds up eroding when it's dry again. Lots and lots of droughts have happened in Zimbabwe. This is the Kariba Dam. The cool statue there. Here's a better shot of Victoria Falls. Look how gorgeous. It's literally like it's like the Grand Canyon. It's almost the same kind of formation. But the water's flowing down this way instead of flowing through that way. Amazing. And this is Dr. Livingston, I presume. The first European to see Victoria Falls, and he named it. And here's Queen Victoria, who the falls are named after. We have an example of the Highveld, basically. Oh, here you go, sorry. I'm at a weird angle here. Comfortable climate, it says. And this is an example of rainy season. Running to get dry. Zebras, or zebras, depending on what part of the English-speaking world you live in. Some of the forest. Wildfires. Zimbabwe is one of those places where wildfires every few years is a good thing for the plant life there. And this is at Hwangi National Park. See some giraffes getting a drink. And the best, elephants. If you've been with my channel long enough, you know that elephants are like my favorite animal. And any video that features elephants prominently, you'll see my little elephant topple. He really started my Hannibal Barca video. He did a great job. This is a map of national parks. You can see Hwangi there is the largest. Some animals. We have a hippo and the eagle shown on Zimbabwe's flag. Let me just read this. The eagle shown on Zimbabwe's flag represents the carved stone bird found at the Great Zimbabwe and other archaeological sites. No one really knows their symbolic significance. Both the martial eagle and the bateleur eagle live in Zimbabwe today. The Zimbabwe birds are really cool. There's a cute lion and a fast cheetah running after its dinner. The flame lily is Zimbabwe's national flower. It says very beautiful flower. My goodness, doesn't even look real. Over here we have these gorgeous trees. So Zimbabwe has trees kind of like in the eastern United States that change really brilliant colors throughout the seasons. It talks about it over here. Timber is, of course, a large industry. And very sadly, this ranger here is looking at poached rhinoceros horns. It's very, very sad. Some ancient cave paintings from the old times. Some examples of the broken pottery that's been found throughout Zimbabwe. It tells us so much about the ancient peoples. Here's a shot of the Great Zimbabwe. So this is in the lower portion. This is the Great Enclosure. You can see these huge walls. And yeah, you can see that there are little buildings inside, little houses out here, but we don't know what the Great Enclosure was really used for. We can only assume. Here's a map of the territory of the Great Zimbabwe. You can see here was the Mutapa that the Zimbabwe kingdom became. I didn't mention in the history over here is the Torwa. I believe the Rosevi wound up conquering them completely, but I'm not positive. Here we see some white people enjoying the ruins. Looks like Tarzan. Some Chinese pottery that's been found. Isn't that cool? They found like Celadon pottery in the Great Zimbabwe too, which was a big Chinese thing. Here's Zulikazi's grave. So you can see it's very protected, like you can't go in and look at his tomb or anything. You can only see the outside. It's very, very protected. And here is what Bulawayo looked like in the late 19th century. Again, sorry for this weird angle. It's the best I can do. You can see lots of the, there we go, Southern African kingdoms. You can see the Zululand, the Transvaal, and then there's Matabele. And down here is Cecil Rhodes talking to the Africans. And there's Lobengula, the king that made the deal with Cecil Rhodes. And here's an example of what the white colonizers were like. Anyway, moving on. So here's what European empires in Africa. You know, in maybe a video I talked about German Southwest Africa, but here you can see Southern Rhodesia and Northern Rhodesia, which you can really recognize as Zambia and Zimbabwe. Pretty much the same borders. Same with South Africa, Mozambique. Here's Ian Smith, a big ol' racist. He's dead now, it's okay. A black nationalist movement, it says. And here's Joshua Nkomo, who was the leader of ZAPU. There's police looking for guerrilla fighters. We won't talk about that. This is, it says Rhodesian Prime Minister Abel Muzorewa outside a meeting where they won their independence. And here's Joshua Nkomo. And there's Robert Mugabe, looking very much like he's in charge. Very much so. Here is an example of what some people did when they wound up seizing the land and the farms. They burnt this one to the ground. Just not a great idea. This is Morgan Tsvangirai, who was the man I told you about that Mugabe said was trying to assassinate him. And he very clearly was not. He was just trying to do better for his country. I think he passed away not quite recently, but like, I want to say like 10 years ago or so now. But anyway, the House of Assembly in Zimbabwe. This book obviously came out when Mugabe was still in power, so The Zimbabwean Flags. You can see the Zimbabwe bird there. Zimbabwe's flag has a field of 7 stripes of different colors with a white triangle at the left. In the center of the triangle is a red star with a yellow Zimbabwe bird over it. Each colored stripe has a meaning. Green stands for Zimbabwe's plants and the resources of its land. Yellow stands for the country's mineral wealth. Red stands for bloodshed during the struggle for freedom. And black stands for the majority of its peoples. The white triangles for peace and the path ahead. The red stars for internationalism. It also reflects the socialist goals of the ruling political party. The bird is the famous Zimbabwe bird found at the Great Zimbabwe and other ancient sites. It represents the country's strong links with its past and its heritage. Solid flag. A+, I'd say. It's got everything in it. This is a rally for the MDC party, which was the party that was fighting back against Mugabe. Surprisingly enough, after Mugabe was removed from power and they held elections against like the ZANU and the MDC, the ZANU party still won the majority after the election. So they're still in charge. This is still the lesser party, but at least they have 2 major parties working together. Here's the Supreme Court building. Here is, it says, an outdoor meeting at a tribal court. So, you know, a lot of governments in Africa, because they've had these traditional, like the tribal leaders would decide court matters, they let those systems continue with like little trivial, like Judge Judy kind of situations, I call them. But everything else obviously goes to higher up courts. Here is Harare, looking gorgeous, and a map of the city, very round. I like cities that are very well planned out. All the historical sites, places to see. We have the municipal offices of Gweru here, looking really nice. Waiting in line to vote. It's a democratic country. Kids at recess. The best time when you're a little kid at school. Here's a school studying hard, learning about something. It's not in English, so I don't know. And working in a lab at the University of Zimbabwe. Look at this picture. I wish this title wasn't here because it's gorgeous. Oh, that scenery. There's a man tilling the soil. An example of Zimbabwe's currency, the Zimbabwe dollar. I'm not positive, but I want to say that they changed the value after inflation happened. I'm pretty sure. I've been researching the next like 2 countries in my series at the same time as this one, so I might have got them mixed up, but I'm pretty sure. Some silos full of grains and a family farm working hard. I just hit my pencil. And what a traditional village looks like. In a story that I'll read you later on, you'll get to see what these little, what these little villages are like. It's very quaint. Here's a tobacco auction house. It's one of the major crops. So is cotton and cattle. Resources, you can see cereals, tropical crops, pastures, and lots of minerals can be mined there. Here is an old gold mine. This is a nickel mine. They also have phosphate, silver, diamonds, other precious stones. Guy working hard on his computer. A train transporting some coal. A very happy looking Shona man. And here's an Ndebele woman outside her gorgeous house. Some cute kids, because there's always cute kids in these books, carrying some water. Gorgeous women with this beautiful hairstyle. I love that. And this caption just says whites are a small minority in Zimbabwe, which is true, but odd photo to highlight that, I think. Bunch of men going to work. Over here we have a lady feeding her chickens, like my landlady does. Persons per square mile, so you can really see where the populations are mostly centered and where they are more sparsely populated. This grandmother cares for her grandchildren who were orphaned by AIDS. It's a very devastating epidemic. More people working hard. More kids having fun. It's a nice little playground. This is a preacher at his church. Very quaint. But this person over here is a Nganga, I believe, Nganga, who is like, oops, there we go, like a traditional healer, medicine person, like using like old-timey methods to heal people. Yeah, I won't get into it, but they have some really interesting tactics, including like possession of ancient spirits, telling them what to do, things like that. Another healer right here, preparing for something. That bottle, I'm not sure what that is. Here's the different like types of healers and diviners. So the Nganga is diviner and healer. There's some Catholic priests vibing apparently, and some people praying. This little kid's like a family. Beautiful. And look at this statue over here. That's gorgeous. So well crafted. I love these big hands. That's awesome. What do we have here? Rituals of death. Let's read this. It says, spiritual beliefs run very deeply in both the Shona and Ndebele cultures. Perhaps the best way to see this is in the rituals that follow the death of a family member. The Shona believe that the spirit of a dead person wanders without a home until the living family members welcome it back as a spirit ancestor. When a person is buried, a stick is placed in the soil above the grave. Oh, my stupid wrister. After a few months, when the soil has settled into place, the stick is removed, leaving a hole in the ground. The spirit is believed to leave the grave through this hole. After about a year, the family holds a special ceremony called a Kurova Guva to welcome the wandering spirit back into the family. One member of the family is chosen as a svikiro, or medium, through whom the spirit is able to speak to the rest of the family. This is usually the oldest son. My landlady's roosters are going off. Here's a Shona headrest, so you can sleep with your elaborate hairstyle and not ruin it. Playing the bira. Sounds so beautiful. This is Doris Lessing, a famous Zimbabwean author. This is Thomas Mapfumo, who performs Chimurenga music, which, if you remember, Chimurenga means like revolt. It says here struggle or fight. So he makes like revolutionary music. Cricket, popular sport. Some of these, again, when I say like rocky, like I'm talking about these. Isn't that amazing? Can you imagine like that's just your backyard? It's so beautiful. Here's another big rock. So cool. So beautiful. This planet is so remarkable. This lady is making sadza. So sadza is like this staple food, like it's eaten every single day. My other book that you're going to hear tomorrow says it's like bread in the West or rice in the East. Like it's just that much of a staple food. And it's like a, I don't know how to describe it. It's like not a cake because it's kind of soft. but you eat it with your hands and you dip it into like stew or soup, whatever you're eating that day. Does it say in here how to describe it? It says mealy, so like, I don't know how to describe it. A wealthy family house and some homeless people, sadly. And a beautiful house and some guys playing checkers. Also vibing. And a mobile health clinic, very important for rural areas, especially when AIDS is a disastrous virus that swept through that area in the 1990s. Sorry if you hear the rooster going off. I've tried to edit it out as much as possible. But that's it for Zimbabwe. So, here we go. Zimbabwe. Thank you very much for watching. If you're still awake, be sure to subscribe because I have some cool Zimbabwe videos coming up for you in the next couple of days. Thank you to my very loyal subscribers. I love getting your comments, but my camera stopped working on my old phone just very suddenly. It said like the lens was dirty, and then it said just no, and it would shut down every time I tried to open it. So I got a new phone, which is what you're seeing this on now. And I ordered some new lighting. Hopefully that comes out nice. So better things in store. Everything has a silver lining. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this video relaxing and educational. That's what I was getting at. Thank you for waiting while my new phone arrived. I was supposed to film this like a week ago, so here we are. Thanks again.